Hello everyone, thank you for joining me again and welcome to any new viewers. This is To The Point English with Ben. I'm Ben, and in this video I'm going to teach you 10 really useful advanced English words which will help you express your ideas more effectively and maybe get you out of some sticky situations. Now, usually when we think of advanced vocabulary, we think of long words, don't we? We tend to think of words with lots of syllables like, I don't know, sesquipedalianism, for example. But sesquipedalianism isn't always the best way. Using lots of long words with lots of syllables can sometimes be a bit confusing for the listener or the reader. And sometimes less is more. So short words which can get the idea across in a more concise and effective way are sometimes better than using really long words. So I think you're going to find these 10 words really useful. So let's get straight to it with number one, which is caveat. Caveat. Now, this is one of those really useful words which can be used in different contexts. So it can be used in more formal contexts like essay writing or report writing, but it can also be used in more sort of colloquial conversational situations. And it basically means a warning. It's a noun that means a warning or some kind of condition. So let's look at a couple of examples. The findings of the survey are persuasive, but they come with the caveat that the sample size was small. So perhaps this is a report, for example, so you're saying that the findings are persuasive, but there's a little warning, there's a condition, and the caveat is that the sample size was small, so that the number of people that were interviewed for this study was small. Another example, I recommend the book with the caveat that its dark subject matter is not to everyone's taste. So in this case, it's a book review, and again, I'm starting with something positive, so I recommend the book, but with a little warning, a little condition that it's not for everyone, it's not to everyone's taste because of the dark subject matter. And the second little word I have for you today is crux. Crux. And this refers to the most important point or aspect of an issue. So it's like the essence of an issue. And we can use crux as a collocation with matter, problem, argument, or even the word issue itself. So let's look at an example. The crux of the matter is that good education should be available to all children. Okay, so perhaps in this case we've been talking about lots of things, lots of different areas surrounding education or maybe politics in general. But this person who is speaking wants to emphasize, the crux, the real essence, everything else is maybe important, but the really important, the most important aspect, the most important point is that good education should be available to all children. So again, this word is quite versatile. It can be used in more formal situations and more informal sort of conversational situations. And the next one, number three, I really like this one. It's usurp. Usurp. And this basically means to take a position, usually a position of power, by force or illegally. So it can be used in quite a literal context where somebody is literally taking a position of power by force or illegally, maybe in a military coup or something like that. But it can be used in more day-to-day situations too. Let's look at the example. Many leaders live in constant fear of being usurped by members of their own team. Okay, so again, this could be a military leader, it could be a political leader, or it could just be a leader in a company. Maybe it's the CEO of a company, or maybe it's the manager of a team. The fact is that they're in fear that some member of their team may try to usurp them. So take that position, not necessarily illegally, but in a sort of a negative way, not in a clean or fair way. Okay, number four is a really short word. It's just apt. Apt. And this actually has two meanings depending on the context. The first meaning we'll look at is appropriate or suitable. So let's look at the example. Your comment is extremely apt given the topic. So in this case, maybe in the speaking paper of a Cambridge English exam, you're responding to your partner. Your partner has said something which you think is really appropriate or suitable given the topic, so you want to recognize that. So your comment is extremely apt. The other meaning of apt is to have a tendency to do something. So in this case, when we use it with this meaning, apt is followed by the preposition to. Again, let's look at an example. Students who practice regularly are apt to do better in exams. So they're apt to do better. So they have a tendency to do better than other students who don't practice regularly, of course. Just a quick point about the pronunciation here. You'll notice that apt finishes with the sound t, and the preposition which follows it, to, begins with the sound t. So it's very difficult to separate the two words when we're speaking. So we don't do it. We join the two words together. It's a form of connected speech. So we say apt to, apt to. Not apt to, but apt to. It flows much better in that way, and as I said, it's more difficult to do it the other way by separating the two words. Okay, number 5 is also a really nice and useful word. It's zenith. Zenith. Now, the literal meaning of zenith is the highest point of a celestial object in the sky, in the celestial sky. But it's unlikely you're going to need to use it in that context. Really, we use it more commonly in a more day-to-day context in which we're referring to the highest or most successful point. So let's look at an example. The film is a masterpiece and marks the zenith of the director's career. So again, this could be a film review, maybe again for the Cambridge English exams if you choose that option in part 2 of the writing paper. So the zenith of the director's career. So we're saying this is the highest or most successful point in this director's career. He or she never got any higher, never did any better, and it's the best film basically in the director's career. And the next word is perhaps the most useful of all the words on this list, and it's myriad. Myriad, which means a great number or countless or just many. Now you have to be a little bit careful with myriad because it can be used as a noun or an adjective, basically in the same context, but the grammar or the vocabulary around myriad changes depending on whether you're using it as a noun or an adjective. So we're going to start with an example of myriad as a noun. Nowadays there is a myriad of ways to connect with people all around the world. So we use the article a or a before myriad and of after myriad. So a myriad of, in this case, ways. But now we're going to look at an example of myriad as an adjective. The course includes myriad tips on how to pass the exam. So in this case, because we're using it as an adjective, we don't need the article and we don't need the preposition of, so just myriad tips. Okay, number 7 now, which is flux. Flux, which means a state of continuous change. A state of continuous change. And this may seem quite specific, but you'll be surprised how often you could use this in different contexts. So let's look at my example. Investing is complicated and risky because the stock market is always in flux and therefore difficult to predict. Okay, so referring to the stock market here, it's a good example because stock markets are always in flux. They're always changing. They're constantly changing. They're never stable. So they're difficult to predict. And again, flux can be used in more formal and informal contexts. And the same could be said about the next one, number 8, which is curb. Curb. Now, curb can be used as a noun or a verb. We can use it to mean to limit or to restrain, or as a noun, a limit or a restraint. So let's look at an example of curb used as a verb first. In order to curb smartphone use in class, it is recommended that they are handed in to the teacher. Okay, so in order to limit or to restrain or to curb the use of smartphones in class, in this case, it's recommended that they are handed in to the teacher. And here's an example of curb used as a noun. Curbs on spending will be enforced later in the year. So curbs on spending, so limits, restraints, restrictions on spending will be enforced later in the year. And word number 9 is rife, which simply means common, frequent or widespread. But it's important to note that this word is usually used in a sort of negative context. So let's look at a couple of examples. Crime is rife in inner city neighborhoods. So this is a very common collocation. Crime is rife. We often use rife to describe crime when it's widespread. When there's a lot of crime taking place in certain places, we can say it's rife. Another quick example, corruption is rife in politics. I'm not going to talk too much about politics, but again, that's quite a common collocation. Corruption is rife. Okay, the last one now, number 10, and it's another 3-letter word. It's a verb, which is vex. Vex, which basically means to annoy or to frustrate. This is a nice word. Again, can be used in formal and informal contexts. So let's look at my example. Unpunctuality really vexes me. I find it so rude. Okay, unpunctuality, so when people arrive late for a meeting, it really vexes me, it really annoys me, it really frustrates me. I find it really rude. Okay, as always, come up with your own examples, use it or lose it, maybe share them in the comments, that would be great. Like this video if you liked it, it really helps me out with the algorithm, and I'll see you very soon for another video.